Hello, and thanks for joining us on the podcast that discusses all things gaming. Coming to you from the home of Gen Con and the gaming capital of the world, this is The Established Facts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Established Facts. I'm going to go around the table and let the panel introduce themselves, starting with my left.
This is Big Don.
Hey guys, this is Derek.
This is Prime.
This is Josh.
This is Dr. Deb.
And joining us via satellite,
Ragar, a.k.a. Jeremy.
Nice. Well, this is not Big Don as the host this time. This is Mike. I've been on a hiatus. It just seems like our schedules have not allowed me to be here, but it is great to be back. It looks to be on my notes that we are on episode 63. I think the last time I was on the show, we were on episode 36. So I have no idea what you people have been talking about, which is a lie. But
We've been talking about you.
I'm not surprised. Everyone talks about me.
The ruiner of stories.
Amen.
Oh, well,
The breaker of games.
But the episode today, it looks like we're going to be talking about the continuity between games. And we are going to just jump right in here, because this is kind of a big and broad topic, so it could possibly get unruly, but we're going to do the best we can to kind of keep it in a nice...
Not as unruly as the last one.
Gaming-shaped box. I was not part of that. Gaming-shaped box, so...
It'll go down in infamy.
With
It will. I mean, it was pretty dangerous.
with the
It's
Mario
the episode
jumps.
that will live in infamy.
Sort of. We discussed whether or not D&D should still exist.
No, we discussed whether or not Wizards should continue to produce D&D.
Should it still exist?
And it was not me, it was Deb that had the
Mario jump.
Mario jump.
I deny all knowledge of the incident.
I don't.
So without you here, everything is going crazy.
I see.
Yeah, right.
I'm the good guy now.
When the cat's away, the
You're
mice
the
will
good
play.
guy now. Oh, I think I'm going to have to quit this show.
Right? For your own safety.
Right. Okay, so the versus topic in the realm of continuity between gamings is we're going to talk about intertwining games versus solo standing games. Let me just kind of break that down for you if you're not familiar with what that is. An intertwining game is if you have maybe multiple parties running the same game and they kind of can influence each other, or you have a really long stretching campaign where kind of each campaign kind of affects either the previous or the post games that happen after the sessions. It's just some kind of game that influences other games. So what you choose, kind of that BioWare style, what you choose affects the rest of the gaming. And then solo standing games, these are generally games that you run, with your core group of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 people, and there's nothing really that follows them. There's nothing really that happened before them. This is just like a snapshot of heroes in the campaign that they're running. So it's kind of big and broad, but we're going to go around the table. And lady and gentlemen, what would you rather have, an intertwining game or a solo standing game? Mr. Demery?
Oh, you're going to make me start. That's all right.
Welcome back.
I wanted. Okay.
Take
I wanted. Well, this is Josh, and I would like an intertwining game.
Typical.
This is Prime. I'm going to have to say I'm on the fence.
Oh.
I know.
Not me.
I took Tony's spot.
Breaking out the shotgun.
I have one of those.
Ragar, how you feel, sir?
It's kind of dependent on the setting, but for a large majority, I'm going to have to say intertwining.
Derek?
Intertwining.
I'm not surprised at
Yeah,
all.
seriously.
Donald? Time's up.
All right. Moving on.
How do you feel, Donald?
I don't know.
two fence sitters.
I'm glad it's a double barrel.
We can't
I think
handle
it doesn't
I
this.
run-
think,
family?
unfortunately, for this specific topic, I think I'm going to have to sit on the fence for this one.
Oh goodness.
It's comfy over here.
The doctor?
It doesn't smell very nice.
No, sorry.
This is going to be interesting. I'm going to say intertwining.
I have to say intertwining. I love the fact that you can mess with everything.
Yeah. No, I do admit that I
Anybody
whine.
picked straight solo.
No.
No, they didn't. No, I do
Which is
whine
kind of shocking.
frequently
Yeah.
about this topic, which is probably why everyone was shocked, because you guys hear me complain
Well, how
like
about
once a
we
week
just start
about it.
right there then?
Oh, okay. Why am I whining about the topic? Is that the point?
We're going to go around and let people kind of
Oh.
defend where they stand.
Oh, okay.
You say that we normally complain about how you are very vocal about this particular instance in gaming, so we'll
I
just
think
start
you
there.
actually pitched the topic to begin with.
I think I did, because I wanted to see how this discussion would go. So
Maybe
here
she
we,
just hates
Here we
life.
go. No. More like I like to see what's going to happen next, and it's sort of fun watching a train wreck.
Hey, I'm here. There will be no train wreck.
As much as we
Because you
try.
are the train wreck.
Amen.
So I say intertwining because I love the complexity of a story that you can tell with either multiple parties telling the story or long years of telling the story, or you can get more complex and you can get more detail when you have an intertwining story than one on its own. And there may be some people out there who disagree, in which case please post on our Facebook site.
Facebook.com/theestablishedfacts.
Anyway, but I
I had to
Overall,
go
I
through my
think so.
Rolodex of websites. I was like, which one is she talking about?
It's like a soundboard.
You really need to create one of
I don't know if you've heard, but we actually have plus.google.com/plus the established facts now, too.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that. I'm informed. And because I'm a detail person, I like the amount of complexity that you can get. I also dislike at times trying to keep it straight in my own head, because I need to be taking more notes, apparently, like John Pettit, to keep straight of who has done what and who's related to who, and because I just can't keep it all straight in my head because the story gets so complex. It's not really a catch-22. I enjoy it. I want to be good at it. When you're in the middle of the game and all of a sudden you just pull a complete blank about, well, hold
Who
on.
you are.
Yeah, who I am, exactly. Yes, actually. Or when you're interacting with a character and you've interacted with the same character as two different characters and you just have this moment of complete blank, like, what on earth am I doing? That's kind of frustrating, but it can also be very entertaining.
I'm sorry, Deb.
Hey, it's not all your fault. Don and I did it to her, too.
Yeah, they did.
We'll go visit Fence Center number 1.
Well, okay. So, though you make valid points, I think I'm going to kind of stick up for the solo gaming, because there are instances where I don't want other people's actions to affect my games. Like, let's say, I've got something planned for my character, and then all of a sudden the whole world alters because somebody else's game that I had no control over what happened, happened, and now my entire gaming is like... I'm basically dealing with a blank slate, like trying to figure out left from right at this point. So, I mean, in that particular instance, it's a little bit aggravating, but at the same time, I kind of like the whole aspect of being able to affect the entire world as it is, like, especially with somebody dealing with their own personal world that they've created in particular, where you've got the options to, alter them drastically versus working out of something that's already like Faerun or something like Everon or something that's already been created and manufactured. I don't necessarily, see them altering that particular environment very much. So,
Derek?
I think we should give a little bit of context on what they're talking about.
Go for it.
I like really complex storylines, and I like it when my campaigns start affecting each other. And I'm currently running a campaign that is broken up into 4 parts. So I've got 4 separate groups of people running through similar scenarios. And so one group can affect other groups, just depending on when the group can get together. So the first group that runs through the scenario this month may be like the third that runs through next month, and so forth. And the decisions that are made in the first group affect the second and third. Like, for instance, in the first session, each of the groups had to save one of 4 people, NPCs that would travel around with them. And they had 4 choices. So the first group had a choice of 4, the second group had a choice of 3, the third group had a choice of 2, and the poor cleric was the last choice. No one wanted the poor cleric. It's... And in other campaigns, like the Baby and Dragon Rider campaign, I like it when those groups interacted and could see, even though they were separate for most of it, ultimately they came together. And what that campaign did affected the Gen Con campaign and so forth. That's what we're talking about right now.
I think you create your own version of a Lost TV show.
I was not going to say it, but I will right now. I have a lot of admiration for J.J. Abrams.
Because it feels a lot like, you're going along and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was what was going on behind the scenes when you play in the game of what was actually happening behind the scenes. So it feels very Lost or Once Upon a Time-ish.
Yeah, and that's what I try to go for. So,
Donald.
You fence sitter.
I will explain to you why I am a fence sitter on this topic.
There is no good reason to be a fence sitter.
Well, Switzerland didn't lose or win the World War, so
They also didn't fight.
that's true.
And birds balance well on fences.
That's true. And electrical wire, but that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with this.
I don't really got that, but
I think the reason why I chose for once in a very long time to kind of be the fence sitter as well as my brother is because I feel like both obviously have their strengths and their weaknesses. I enjoy as a GM and kind of being the second one out of Josh and myself and Derek to kind of do well. I guess I was the third one because Josh had done it before me, but to be able to kind of intertwine little bits and pieces of 2 separate storylines in the same world to affect one another. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun to be able to steer one group one way and then potentially steer the other group like right smack dab in the middle of the previous group's storyline. But I think more than anything, the biggest contrast between the two is it has to do with, in my opinion, the number of players you have, the time that you have to run, and the experience of your players. Because if you're sitting down with a brand new group of gamers who have never touched, Universal Storytelling System or D20 or whatever other 5,000 role-playing systems there are out there, it can be difficult because, in the beginning you're trying to work on mechanics and then you're trying to get people to understand, okay, you're just playing, you're playing a character in a story. You're not, there is no necessarily, there is not necessarily a game board or pieces or anything like that. Most of this game is played in the, in the imagination. And so it can be kind of difficult for people in general to grasp the idea that there is another group that is influencing them, whether it be positively or negatively. Sometimes that can have, drastic consequences. But I think overall, I enjoy playing in a game that intertwines with other storylines because I feel like it is a lot more true to real life. There's a little less escapism when it comes to that style of play because, in real life, we can affect each other's decisions and actions drastically depending on what we do. And so it's really kind of cool when you're playing in a world that's similar to that of another group who is doing something very similar in a similar or same place and how that can affect you positively or negatively and what decisions you have to make in order to counterbalance what they have done. I made a couple notes.
Can I interject
yeah.
something right quick about
Yeah.
new gamers? I wouldn't, as their first session or several sessions, I would literally just do one-offs, like on games, and then bring them into a campaign so
Right.
that they understand.
And that was kind of another point that I was going to make was when you're playing in a con game, unless you're doing like what Derek had done up until last year, where you have a game that is stretching from each entry of that con to the next year, and you're only playing one or two of those sessions each year, and then at the end it all culminates and kind of completes the story, and you have characters that are consistent throughout those games, because the risk you run at a con game, especially a game like at Gen Con, when you have 49,000 people, is you may not have the same players register for the next game, and so that could drastically throw off what you were trying to do with your storyline. But if you've got dedicated players that are going to come back next year, then it's kind of nice to be able to sit down with even 3 or 4 of the same faces and say, okay, well, this is where you guys left off a year ago, so let's catch up a little bit, and then we'll get right into the mix.
So as we're talking, I've realized something about myself, and that is that I'm a masochist.
I'm glad you finally realized that.
Yeah,
Jordan does it totally.
congratulations.
Accepting it is the first step to recovery.
That's right.
Do you realize how less stressful your running life would be if nothing ever connected?
Yes, actually I do.
And kind of my last main point, real quick, and then Rygar, I'll let you have it. But it seems to me that when it comes to intertwining storylines, you see a lot more of them in original content. So, for example, Derek's World of Palagane, our friend Danielle's World of Iodadri, a lot of that content, a lot of that interweaving and intertwining of stories and parties and storylines and cause and effect. A lot of that you see more in what might be an original campaign setting versus something, that is already an established campaign setting where you are playing a player that is affected by what the book has already said has happened. So,
Mr. Ragar?
You were hitting on a lot of the points that I was alluding to in my choice. I feel it's heavily based on the experience that you want to have. If you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog, for instance, I see that as kind of a intertwining game between each of the different versions, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3. You have a continuing story aspect to that. Whereas if you play something like Kobolds Ain't My Babies, it's a one-off because that's just the design of it. Or like a card game would be a one-off kind of thing.
Right. That's good. I didn't really connect of course, I wasn't really thinking about like the genre of games for video games versus this topic, but that's cool. Deborah, I think you had your hand up. I'm gonna jump back over to you, and then I'll give my opinion, and then we'll move from there.
Well, I had 2 different thoughts, and the problem was as Dawn was talking, I got my second one, and I had the first one earlier. So sorry if this seems disconnected. I didn't mean for it to. When you made the comment about original content, enunciation is great. I was thinking about the Dragonlance series, actually, and when you hear about the story of how it was originally come up, that was original content at one point. And I wonder if the folks who played the original Dragonlance game had anything like this conversation some odd 20-ish years ago about a continuing campaign, because I don't know if that was a big thing back in the early Dungeons and Dragons days. But now that original content is very famous content, if you will, world famous in the gaming industry at least. And then my second comment, and then I'm going to be quiet and give it back to Mike. So I think about the intertwining story as being, I don't know if any of you have ever had a story or a book or a movie series that you watched and you never really wanted it to end. Even though it was a good ending. So, for example, you're Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, one of those kind of epic things. It was a good ending, but you kind of wanted to keep going, or tell us more. What happened in the past? What happened in the future? What other stories were going on? And there wasn't, because they ended the story. So I think about an intertwining campaign as being a story that really never ends. Because even if you end one solid line of thought in the game. All of a sudden, you can do all the spin-off stories, or you can do past, or you can do future, or you can do these odd shoot-offs. So the story really doesn't have to end, and so it's fun because you don't have to have that sad moment of, okay, well, you know what, this chapter's over, but don't worry, folks, we're going to have another chapter here soon, and keep playing it. And I think it's very fun. It's very satisfying.
You guys were talking about original content versus like established. In the living campaigns, they will frequently. I can only speak to Living Greyhawk. I haven't been involved enough in
Galarian.
Galarian.
Paizo's world.
But during the interactives, when during the big conventions, multiple regions would get together, and you would have intertwining things like Caitlin would interact with, and I'm completely blanking on this, but on the different regions, and so you would definitely see intertwining there as well, even though it's Greyhawk or.
Well, and decisions made, from what I understand, in a lot of those organized games, decisions made and events that occur in certain established situations can further change the story as it goes forward. It's funny, the game that was fictionally created for the Hands of Fate Gamers 3 movie. Totally forgetting what in the world. Romance of the Nine Kingdoms, Thrones, something like that. Yeah. They turned it into a game, and Alderac Entertainment actually released the game. It's a card game. It's got all the 9 kingdoms in it, so you can sit and play. But if you go to their webpage, they have this page that says they've lost all the data from the 15 years that it apparently existed, because you watch the movie, it's been around for 15 years apparently. So they re-released it as a new game. It was really entertaining. But that game, the whole point of that game is, as you're playing through it, when decisions are made, if characters die and that decision has been made, it affects the story continuing forward. And it's a really neat concept. I love that idea. You mentioned Dragonlance, and this is one of those topics I'd love to pick Tracy Hickman's brain about, too.
I think we have a topic for Gen Con. Do we?
Maybe.
Depends on Tracy Hickman.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
If we can book him again.
Well, if I've got a blast with him.
Didn't we get him like twice in a row?
2 years in a row. I'm gonna work on 3 here soon.
Let him know we'd love to talk about Dragonlance.
Oh, okay.
That might.
Well, it's the year. It's the 40th anniversary of Dragonlance.
We so have to do this.
If anybody's going to talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, we definitely have like the top of the
absolutely
front of the line, seeing as how we got the last 2 years.
Hey. 140 followers on Facebook.
140 strong.
That's right.
So, I guess when I'm looking at an intertwining game versus like a solo standing game, I prefer an intertwining game, but I very much agree with you, Donald, that it kind of just depends.
All right.
But I think the most satisfying thing as a gamer to me is when I play in a game, be it a one-shot game or any other type of game, and then I play in another campaign and there are the proverbial head nods to what have happened in the game before or in the campaign before, or someone is playing the child of your character and someone else.
The Spoon of Bill Cosby was started in a one-shot, and then it made its way over here.
Right,
correct. And it's the same thing when you play a character in a one-shot and just fall in love with them, and then you yank him out of the one-shot and play him somewhere else. Because realistically, if you think about that, what happened? Okay, so he took part in this campaign with all these other people. They finished up what they were doing. They went their own way, and then he jumped over and joined another group of people. If you just think about it that way. I think it's just a really interesting turn of events when you step back as that third party and you look at your character as as an orc or a gnome or whatever he is, and look at him as an individual and say, okay, you're not just a guy that I play Pathfinder with as a character. You have quirks, and you have things that you like, and you have things that you don't like, and you have stuff that you do. And as you progress down that path, I'm reminded of Climley. He's my gnome that I played. And he was very superstitious, so he felt like if he had a bad day when he came, if he was in a town, he had a bad day, when he left the town, he would dust off his shoes. He's essentially knocking all of the dust and all of the bad stuff off, so that way he can start a new travel, and all this stuff. And it's a really neat concept to watch as a campaign progresses, and watch how your characters affect other people. How, even if you don't do it from campaign to campaign, but Climley was written up as a pre-generated character that was taken to a con that someone else could have played. So my choices as a player influenced what options another player had available to them. Mm-hmm. So whether that person knew it or not, they were taking part in an intertwining campaign, but they were playing it as a solo campaign.
And you can play Clemley if you want to in Heroes Love Song, which is available from Paizo.com. Mm-hmm. It's a free download.
And you can also play his gnome companion, I guess. It's more like compatriot, Ziri, in the same one, which you've heard me mention on here probably several times.
Donald?
I was just thinking about something that kind of ties in with what you were just talking about, and our subject of intertwining storylines, about the concept of someone who, for example, if I were to play in a Pathfinder Society game and build a rogue for a Pathfinder Society game, taking that character and leaving it as a legitimate Pathfinder Society character, but also making another iteration that plays in several different campaigns with other groups of players, and then literally writing out each different story and kind of turning him into, if you will, the Quantum Leap adventurer. Like, he's jumping from life to life. Yeah, basically like that. Like,
once went wrong.
Right.
Been hoping one day to find his way home.
Exactly. Yes. And all that.
And he never does.
He never does.
But, he ends up in a bar.
Right.
No, he doesn't. He ends up the captain of the Enterprise.
That's right.
That's true.
Which, really, it's a win-win.
Score, right?
It's a win-win. But, kind of using that as an example of saying, this is my character, so-and-so, and you just write down all the Pathfinder Society adventure tracks that he's completed, and that's part of his story. But then he also has this parallel life that he lived, with... It kind of reminds me of, if you're a Star Trek fan, the Jean-Luc Picard basically his mind gets sucked into this probe that's just drifting in space, and he actually plays out the life of this other person, like a full lifetime. He gets married, and he has children, and he has grandchildren, and he...
Inner Light,
yes,
is the episode you want to look at.
It's like a 2 or 3
for Star
part,
Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, it's like a 2 or 3 part episode. Really good, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of. It's like, and then when that probe goes away, he has literally lived in his mind. He has literally lived an entire lifetime as this other person, but he's also himself. Jean-Luc Picard up to this point, whatever he has done, and how that might affect the player in the way that he plays that character, knowing that he has all this other back knowledge that maybe nobody else knows, or maybe it's not even important in this storyline, but you can continually call back on these stories. It would be fun to play a bard in that, because you could just continue to call back on these different stories and things like that. So, anyhow.
Deb?
Well, I have to spin off, because I actually thought Don was thinking of the one I was, but I'm thinking of a Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So Star Trek has done this several times, but they do the one in where Ben Sisko, in the episode Far Beyond the Stars, Ben Sisko starts experiencing the life of a man in the 1950s, Benny Russell, who's writing the book of his story, of Ben Sisko's story. So it's like they're one character, but they're two, and you wonder who is the actual character and who's the imagination, or are they both real? Are they both imagination? It's this wonderful, just kind of play on your mind, like which one is actually thinking of the other one. So I think that totally keys into that gaming idea.
And if you play like Pathfinder Society or those types of games, don't consider that your character is just like Fear the Boot says, Vitor or Wizard or something like that. My first character, Dongak, became the Super Mutt. And he had an incredible storyline that he built up as he played module through module, where he like had a half-fey child. He was considered a dwarf. He saved children, and it translated to my secondary character Favaz and Pervarv, and how Favaz earned his wings and all that. So I mean, these society games, these like living campaigns, that's what I love about them, is that you can really develop a character from region to region. I mean, definitely like go to out-of-state cons for this and look at what those writers are doing. I know that Paizo releases their modules online, but I mean, try to go to different regions as much as possible.
Yeah, because it's just as important to enrich your story or the life of your character with other adventurers as it is, maybe in your character's life they played the first part of this, what would be normally as a player an adventure campaign, but in your character's life this was a whole event that happened, and then they had to leave that party to go and do this other thing that consequently is in the same story progression or story arc, but it's, you're not with that familiar group anymore. Now all of a sudden you have to adapt to these people, and, it allows you to kind of really get into the idea that, it allows you to get into the idea like almost in real life where, you may be living in, Oklahoma City, you get a job offer in Cincinnati, and then you take that job offer in Cincinnati, and then all of a sudden you may go back to St. Louis or something.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
I'm just...
What is that story you're telling?
But I'm saying, in that situation, you have people that you work with and friends and people that you talk to, and then all of a sudden you're transplanted into a different area where you have to make friends and you have to work with people again, and then you transport to a different area, and all of this is that physical progression of your story or of your character's story, depending on what you do.
Yeah, as a traveler, I had to do that a lot. Go ahead.
So, one of the things that we've touched on pretty heavily is the whole player aspect of this, but I'm curious, since we have some GMs here who have done intertwining stories and solo-style stories, what are some tips or tricks or something that you could bring to share with some of the people out there?
Well, let's start with our resident game master extraordinaire.
With the 4 different stories of
intertwining goodness.
Not counting con games.
First thing that you need to do is invite Mary Beth to be in all of your games.
She's our note taker.
Yeah, and that goes really into the first tip is to take notes. You don't necessarily have to take copious notes for planning.
John Pettit.
But he does take it to a little bit of an extreme. But you do need to take notes because you will constantly be asking, I don't remember who said what. Or I will go up to Deb and say, okay, which character did X, Y, and Z?
And then Deb looks blank for a while because she's trying to remember which character did it.
Yeah. I think it was the same character that went to, like, Eden.
Mm-hmm. That's Ellie, Ellie Sheva.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the character I kept on forgetting who it was, and I wouldn't take notes, and it's a bad habit of mine. I'm taking notes now during our current one.
I do try to thank John Pettit, by the way, after almost every session, because of the GM notes and the GM logs that he posts and all of the NPC narrations. Just fantastic little fluff stories.
I just had a realization that when we finally have our final Star Wars game, he will more than likely be here in the physical form.
Yeah,
that's
no, that's what he's trying to do. He IM'd me about that.
Okay.
That's fantastic!
Sorry.
Yeah,
We'll have
you
to
will not
organize
see
a
us
present.
for an entire day because we'll be playing a night game. Like you see us every weekend anyway. So, moving on. The other thing is it's really important to separate the characters for long stretches of time and then bring them together so that it's special when they come together.
Kind of like the heroes' storylines.
Right, exactly. And make sure your world is consistent. Because if you start having to do retcons, and you've got to do retcons for 3 other people or what have you. So, those are pretty much the tips that I've got.
Don't be afraid to create a game in an area that has been unexplored.
Yeah.
I ran the Destruction of Xenopolis game, as we call it, based off Alderax, world's largest city. It's a game I wanted to run for the longest time, but with all the history that we were working on developing for Derek's World of Peligane, I thought it might fit. And there's a map of the World of Peligane on PeliganeProject.com. You'll see a giant hole, basically, in the middle of it, called Xeno Hollow now, because of that game. I looked at his map and saw the giant hole and was like, hey, we're going to do the destruction of Xenopolis. What's Xenopolis? A city of people. Well, I'm going to name this crater Xeno Hollow, and that's where this all came from. But don't be afraid to explore history, and always be open with the world's creator if you have that option. Not everyone does. Some people may take liberties with Paizo's Galarian or Neverwinter for a D&D or Greyhawk, whatever. You're going to take liberties. You're going to create your own side stories, but it's a pleasant bonus to have the world creator. So if you screw it up, he can correct you. But on the same note, if you come up with something that he hadn't thought of, he can actually give you praise for it. Thinking it's pretty cool.
Mike does with care.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to take risks when you're doing these long running games. But on the same side of that, be prepared that the player characters will hold you to those risks, and we'll be glad to take them themselves. Very much so, as a matter of fact.
You really need how do I put it? Active players.
Yes,
to do
active.
something about this.
They do.
Yeah. You can't have people that are just saying they're entertain me.
Right.
Well, and know that the likelihood that an active player is going to completely screw up whatever you are trying to get forward, like destroying a colossal red dragon that you've been waiting the entire campaign to run in a matter of 2 rounds.
I shed so many tears.
Who does such things?
Know that
Finding ways
happen.
to just completely bypass entire dungeons.
Yeah.
I think I have. I'm not normally the guy who runs games for our group of people.
Yeah, why don't you, Mike?
I'm working on that.
Smarter than that.
Well, no, because I don't want to have to kill you all.
We need more Shadowrun.
But I do have, being a player that has played under all 3 of the Game Masters, I do have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to that.
That's dangerous.
It is.
And we keep having him back.
And
because he shows us our flaws.
And the big thing about running games that are really long and have lots of intrigue and lots of ways to hook characters into believing the character that the character is real. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to convince the character that I've created that the character is real. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of these guys have done a great job when it comes to that. There has not been a character that I've played that I really just, at the end of the game, said, yeah, okay, I'm okay with putting him on the shelf and being done with it. And I guess where I'm getting at in this whole aspect is, as a game master, you really only have one job, whether it's a solo game or an intertwining game or whatever kind of campaign you're putting together. If you're reading box text, it doesn't matter. Your job is to provide some type of atmosphere that these guys are going to play a story out in, and to be enjoyable and provide an entertaining time. And through all of the course of the events that I've played in, the biggest thing that I can say as a player who's played under these guys is if it hurts the player, Mike, when the character dies or events take place or
Then do it.
or
As long as it hurts Mike. Mike is the only key word here.
well, it is. That's
I really
true.
am sorry about that spider.
No, it's all right. I wasn't.
Yeah, let's talk about that
wasn't-
spider,
I wasn't
shall
even.
we?
I wasn't even going there.
I will.
But if it hurts the player when actions take place in the game, then you're doing things correct.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if I can convince game masters to throw notes across the room or cry because I'm doing things or be pissed off because I've ruined their show, I'm doing things right.
Yep.
Because as a character, my job is not to necessarily run in whatever story is being dictated before him. It's his job just to live his life. And he's going to make choices based on whatever's in front of him, and that might not always be whatever's on pen and paper on the notes. Mm-hmm. So, just you said you got to be open with that, and that's the key to the whole thing. Is if you're going to have any type of game that interacts with anything else, you have to be open and you have to let your players take the game wherever it's going to go.
And the second rule is not to be a cohort of Mike's characters. They will die.
That is true. That is true. That is absolutely the truth.
It's when you make a deal with the devil, though.
Yeah,
Literally.
and then he ends up in a castle. But
Our poor listeners, they have no clue what we're
No
talking
idea.
about. I'm sorry.
Listeners, if you play in a game with these guys, they will set up businesses and they will take over regions and
that you had
businesses.
no reason to be in it ever again.
Exactly. So that's what we're talking about. They've started up brothels. They've started up.
A brothel in Nevada that had teleportation between it and another one in Brazil.
Yes. Yes.
I would like to state for the record that I was not a part of this.
No, I'm
either.
sorry, owner of what was it? What was
I wasn't
the
part of the
planet?
brothel storyline.
Hold on, you were an owner of what planet in Star Wars? What was that you handed over the
Tatooine?
reins? Tatooine? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Tatooine.
Yeah, that was totally you.
Who wants Tatooine?
I was an elected senator, thank you very much.
You were an owner. You gave it away. The planet. You gave the whole planet away.
Worth it.
No one wants Tatooine.
Please visit us at www.theestablishedfacts.com and our Facebook page, facebook.com/theestablishedfacts. If you would like to support us by buying some merchandise, visit catholicpress.com/castingrobot.
Bonus